Hello to another tutorial. In this video we will add some functionality to the calendar that we made in the previous one. As you can see, I've loaded here my project. Our calendar works fine, but it's not interactive, and I will show you three things in this video. The first one will be every time you click on a cell, the background changes color. Will make it blue, for example. So if you click on 6, for example, the background of this cell will be blue. The second one will be a transition to a new view controller every time you click on a cell. And to make it a little more better, we will create a label in the new view controller that shows us the date we clicked on. So for example, if you click here on 8, it will load a new view controller, and it will show us the date we clicked. And the third one will be a view that animates and loads every time we click on a cell. The same thing with the view controller, but instead of just loading a new view controller, we will animate a view that could show us something, whatever we want. So let's start with the first thing. If we want to highlight our cell, we can use a function that belongs to the collection view data source protocol, and it's called select item add. Let me show you. Function collection view did select item add index path. So we write our function here in our class. Make sure you don't write this function inside one of the other functions. It doesn't work like this. And this function here gives us the index path of the cell that we click. So for example, let me show you. If you write here print index path dot row in this function here and load our project to see it better like this, open the terminal, and if you click on a cell, it will show us the index of the cell. Notice that the index is always bigger than our date. So if you click on 10, the index will be 12. That's because the index path. That's because two reasons. The first reason is the index path starts always at 0, and the second one is that the index path calculates the empty boxes. So remember that the index path starts from here. It will be 0, 1, 2, 3. So the 1 will be at index path 3. So the next step, go to the variables and create a variable called, let's say, highlight date. Light date, and set it equal to -1. It needs to be a negative number or a positive number bigger than 35. That's I will tell you later why. So we create the variable here, then go down to the function, delete the print, and every time we click on a cell, we want our variable highlight date to be equal to the index path that we clicked on. And after we set the variable equal to the index path we click on, we want our collection view to reload. So remember, every time we click on one cell on our calendar, it automatically sets the highlight date equal to the index path that we clicked on, and it reloads our calendar, our collection view. So go to the function that creates our calendar, this function here. Just before we return the cell, we want to check if the highlight date is equal to the index path, that row that is created. If this happens, we want the cell background color to be equal to UI color dot blue. We forgot the if statement here. Okay, let's test it. So when you click here, you will see that the background is getting blue, but we have a little problem. You will notice that when you change a month, the blue remains on the date. We don't want this to happen. How can we avoid this? We have to go to the functions next and back to the buttons, and before the switch statement we will set our variable again to -1, and in the back button also before the switch statement set it to -1 again. So every time you hit one of the two buttons, our variable is getting again -1, and there is no blue background anymore. So when you click here, you will see that when you change month, the blue is getting white again. And I think that's all for the first one. Why I set the variable equal to -1? So after we click on a cell, actually not. When we load our project in the view did load, we create our calendar. If our date is, for example, 10, then when the calendar loads, it will find an index path that's equal to our variable, and you will see that when we load it, there will be a blue background, and we don't want this to happen. So I set it to -1. You can set it to 50, 40, whatever you want. It will have no problem. It will have problem if the value is between 0 and 31, 32, 33, depends on the month. Just a little notice. So the next thing we want to make, as I said, I want to make a view controller that is loaded every time we hit a cell. So let's go to the main storyboard, drag a view controller to our scene, and this view controller needs, of course, a new Swift file. So click Command New, create a Cocoa Touch class, view controller, and it will be a subclass of UI view controller. Name it next view controller. Okay, let's create this. Next view controller. Okay, we don't need this. Leave just the view did load function, so we can modify our label that we'll create later. So just change the background to dark gray. Click on the calendar view controller, go to the circle here, hold Control, click on the touchpad and drag a line to the new view controller. Then go here and click Show. This creates a connection to our new view controller, and if you click here, you will see that you can set an identifier here. We will name it Next View. This identifier is very useful to trigger transitions to the new view controller in our Swift file whenever we want. So let's go to the view controller. We will go to the function that select animate index path, and this is an easy one. We want every time when a cell is clicked to trigger the transition to our new view controller. So just click here, perform sequi with identifier. It's the identifier we set here, next view. Make sure you write it right or you will have errors. Next view, and sender will be self. So every time we click on a cell, our view controller is loaded, our next view controller. Just one thing I forgot. We need to connect our next view controller to our Swift file. Click on the new view controller, go here, and in the class type next view controller, enter. So now this view controller is connected to our new Swift file. Let's load our project and test it. So let's click at the cell. Perfect. You will see that the new view controller is triggered, the transition. So we will create a label here that will show us the date that we clicked on. How can we do this? First thing, we will create this variable here and call it date string. Make sure to create this variable before the class. That's because we want this variable to be a global variable, so we can access it also in the next view controller. That's the first thing. So we want this variable to be equal to the date that we click on. So let's get again to our last function that selected the animate index path, and every time we click on a cell, we want to modify this variable. How can we do this? Let's write here date string. This will be equal to the date. To calculate the date, we will use our index path. Let's see again our project to explain how can we do this. So every time you click on a cell, for example 7, it gives us the index path that begins from the start. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It will give us 9. We can find the day of the month by taking the index path and subtract for it the empty boxes and add to it 1 again, just to show you. In my calendar project, I have this variable here, position index, that gives us the number of empty boxes in every month. If we go to the variable here, down below, and say index path minus that index path.row, minus our position index, that is the number of the empty boxes, 3, plus 1, it will be the day that we click on. So for example, if we click on 8 here, this value here will be 8. So we have the day. Next, we want the month. The month will be our current month. We get the value from our variable that's calculated before, and we want also the year that we have also ready, and this gives us the exact date that we click on every cell. So just to show you, I will need to delete the sequence. If we create this date string and print it, you will see that every time I click on a cell, it gives me the exact date in the terminal. Let's test it. So if we click on 9, it gives me 9 February of 2018. 12, the same. Let's change month. The month changes, and just let's change the year to test it again. 1st February of 2019. It works. Perfect. So our string is calculated right. We just need to pass it to the new view controller. So remember, you click on the cell. Every time you click on a cell, the date string variable will be equal to the date you click on, and the new view controller will be loaded. So when the view controller loads, we want it to display the current date that we clicked on. Going into the main storyboard, and let's create a label. Label here, drag it in the new view controller. Let's make it a little bigger. Alignment here. The color to white to be much clearer. So if you click Alt, Command and Enter, you will open the Assistant Editor. Click here the next view controller, go to the label and Control drag to create a new outlet. Type UI label, name it date label, connect it. Go to the next view controller. We have our outlet here, and we have our date string variable. That's a global variable because we created it outside the class, and we want, after the next view controller loads, the date label text to be equal to our date string. This should work, and let's try this out. So if we click on 7 February of 2018, the new view controller loads and show us the date. Of course, you can do anything you want here. You can add the back button to go again back. You can add some text fields. You can do whatever you want in your project. So that was the second thing I wanted to show you. And the third and last thing is to create a view inside the current view controller that loads up every time we click on a cell. So this will be a much similar with the previous one. Just 1 second to delete this. So I will just delete everything. So go to the main storyboard. Let's forget this. We don't need this. And let's create a blur view. Drag it above our calendar. Make sure to be on the bottom here. Drag it to the corners and set the alpha equal to 0. And let's create also a new view that is above, not inside, our blur view. Let's drag this view also to the corners. And set its alpha also to 0. Make its color dark gray. Don't drag it around the corners, put it in the center just here. So we set the alpha to 0. And let's create 2 outlets in the view controller. The first one will be from here, our blur view. First one, and the second one will be our view. So after we create these 2 outlets, remember we set the alpha equal to 0. So when you load the project, you will see that these 2 views are not visible. So we have an error here. Okay, let's rename it to new view. Give me a second to correct this. So we will delete the outlet here that we created and drag it again to the new view. Okay. So when we load our project, you will see that the views are not visible. We can use our calendar normally, but we won't. Every time we click on a date to animate these 2 views from alpha 0 to 1. So we will go in our view controller again in our last function, and remember we created the 2 outlets here of our views that we can use, and we will type here UI view dot animate. So this should work. Okay, that's right. So if we write it like this, it should trigger the transition to our view when we click on some cell. So our calendar is loaded, we go to a cell, and when we click it, yes, the background blurs in. It is not noticeable because our background is white here, but I can show it like when we go to our view and set its background to red and our blur view to dark, you will see that when you click at some cell, our view animates in and the background it's getting blurred out. So let's click here. You see we're getting a blurred background and our view loaded. So that's the third thing I wanted to show you, and I hope you like it, and it will help you to your projects. If you like this video, like this video and subscribe to my channel to support what I do, and thank you very much for watching.